Time is dear, and I realize that everybody's got many things that they've got to do, and I want to welcome you to this, which is the fourth and final AJC-sponsored panel presentation during the Republican National Convention. Today's topic is Middle East challenges, opportunities, and aspirations for the next administration. And needless to say, the next administration is going to have a great deal on its plate. Inevitably. We are joined today, and I'd say honored to be joined today, by two, and hopefully a third individual will be joining us shortly, specifically Representative Gus Bilirakis, Republican of Florida, whom I've had the pleasure to work with regard to the Hellenic-Israel alliance up on the Hill. Also Dr. Walid Phares, who's a foreign policy advisor for Donald Trump, and with a special focus and special knowledge with regard to the Middle East. The program today is going to be moderated by our own, AJC's own, Jason Isaacson, who's our Associate Executive Director for Policy and the Director of AJC's Office of Government and International Affairs. Before we begin, though, on behalf of all of us, I want to congratulate Jason on, I think it's tomorrow, your 25th anniversary, today, 25th anniversary with AJC. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason now to moderate the panel.
Thank you, Alan, very much. Good morning, everybody. We're looking forward to a fascinating discussion on the most complex and perplexing topic. But I think before we get into the back and forth with Dr. Phares and Congressman Bilirakis, I would like to ask Congressman Bilirakis to sort of open the conversation. Congressman, thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate it.
As Alan referred to with AJC and the Congressional Hellenic-Israel alliance, so important.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. I could not have done it without AJC and HAWK, which is a Greek organization out of Chicago. So again, I want to thank Walid and Jason for having me here today. I'm Congressman Gus Bilirakis, and I'm from the great state of Florida. I represent part of the Tampa Bay area, and I'm of Greek descent, and I love the Jewish community. As a matter of fact, I was just telling Julie that I did my DNA, the Ancestry.com. I don't know if you can hear me. And we just got it back a couple months ago, and 4% European Jewish. Oh. So I think I qualify. I do have a written statement. If you don't mind, I'd like to present it. As a former member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I know how important these issues are. And again, I'm from Greektown, USA, Tarpon Springs, Florida. My grandparents came at a young age. Their parents came as actually the grandfathers, great-grandfathers, my great-grandfathers came as sponge divers from the southern part of Greece. I'm going to stick to the script because I can talk forever, and I don't want to do that. So I'm proud to chair the 140-member strong Hellenic Caucus and the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance, or CHIA as we call it. CHIA would not be possible without the passionate support, as I said, of AJC, and I want to thank especially Jason, of course, and Julie, and all of the staff for their help bringing these communities together from the very beginning. It's so very important. We have so much in common. We are here to discuss the many geopolitical challenges that remain in the Middle East and how practically and ideally the next administration can address them. That's a broad discussion, and of course we don't have a lot of time, so I can't get into too much. I have to catch a flight tomorrow morning, so so I will try to keep, again, my own opening remarks as brief as possible. Terrorism is tragically still gripping our headlines, and the biggest challenge we face is rooting out and destroying the networks that support this terrorism. Don't you agree? From Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to Hezbollah and other advanced organizations that funnel money and supplies across the entire region. We must challenge our intelligence, finance, and military organizations to work together more efficiently. We must also collaborate better with our European allies. Representative Deutsch, a good friend of mine, and I recently introduced, with AJC support, of course, a resolution calling on the European Union to designate the entirety of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. This will allow the U.S. and EU to more seamlessly work together, track and attack the networks that enable terrorist attacks to occur. We must be a better partner to Israel, something that the current administration has let slip with the misguided trust of Iranian mullahs that underpins the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. In Congress, we work to keep this important relationship as strong as possible with the help of AJC. We repeatedly forge and update strategic memoranda of understanding, fully fund and improve missile defense systems, and continuously combat BDS and anti-Semitism across the world. Last week, we passed legislation to further sanction the most dangerous and immediate threat to peace in the region, Iran, a country that defies their promises and antagonizes the region with ballistic missile tests and inciting rhetoric. The next administration must follow the congressional lead and stop infusing doubt into what has historically been the strongest international democratic relationship in the world. That's for sure. The next administration must also do more to protect religious minorities in the Middle East. Christian populations in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and other Middle East countries are on the verge of complete collapse. There's my good friend, Trent, who's a strong leader in the United States Congress, as you know, and a strong supporter of Israel. We had a chance to go to Israel together a few years ago. Sadly, this is the same fate that befell Jewish minority populations in the last several decades as well. Now the brutal genocide of Christians is almost impossible to comprehend, as if out of eras past, we must do more to protect them and prevent future destructions. The Jerusalem Post editor and former Netanyahu advisor, and you know Carolyn Glick pretty well, I'm sure, recently shared some statistics to better prove this point. In Iraq, Christians comprised 8% of the population in 2003. Today, less than 1% of Iraqis are Christians. In Syria, the Christian community has lost between half and 2/3 of its members in the past 5 years. Between half and 2/3 of its members. Although Christians made up 10% of Syrian population in 2011, they comprise a mere 2.7% of the Syrian refugees the Obama administration has allowed into the U.S. These are the safest refugees, I think you'll agree, to vet and clear. And yet it has not been a priority of this administration. That's pretty clear. This must change. We must prioritize visa requests from religious minority activities and leaders of the persecuted communities to visit the U.S. and share their information here with better access to press coverage. We must speak in a unified voice to protect these persecuted minorities in the world's most dangerous region. Lastly, the next administration must take a firm stance when dealing with our supposed allies in the region. Last weekend's attempted overthrow of the Turkish government brought to light much of the growing instability in the country as well as the surrounding region. The State Department doesn't know how to handle Erdogan's encroaching authoritarian power in light of the need to use Incirnix runways for UAVs and refueling airplanes to support the airstrikes further east. We need bolder, experienced leaders to set the rules and enforce them, not react to an unstable and erratic leader. Erdogan's crackdown on the rule of law, political opposition, religious freedom, and the media has exposed the country he intends to run. We must loudly encourage a return to democratic principles and the respect for human rights that we take for granted. There are opportunities in the region if we overcome this turmoil. I recently returned from the Congressional delegation trip to Cyprus and Israel that allowed me to see firsthand how the progress of diplomatic and energy cooperation between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel continues to grow. The potential reunification of Cyprus is the key to unlock decades of reluctance of regional actors to work together and prosper. Military defense, technology, healthcare, and communications cooperation are ripe opportunities for growth and cooperation that the next administration can focus on as well. Global security will be the ultimate priority for the next administration as long as terrorism continues to crawl around the Middle East. We must rely on all forms of collaboration and intelligence to rid the world of this threat so that economic vitality can retake its place atop our priority list. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to. And I want to thank you for having me here today. And again, I'm looking forward to forging even a greater relationship in that region between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. So we're on to something really good, and I couldn't do it without y'all. Thank you very much for having us here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think that got us off to a very good start on this conversation, and I thank you for those remarks. I'd like to first of all welcome Congressman Trent Franks for joining us. Thank you very much. AJC has had the privilege of working with very closely with Congressman Franks on a number of issues that are very relevant to the discussion that we're having today. So thank you again for taking time. But I'd like to ask Dr. Phares, whom AJC has also known for a great many years, and actually one of my colleagues had the pleasure of being a student of Dr. Phares as well, Julie Raymond. Oh. You can raise your hand. And so we've had a very long association in very different contexts, many different contexts with Dr. Phares. But he is a foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump. He is also a Fox News analyst and a widely recognized counterterrorism expert. And I'd like to begin, Dr. Phares, by asking you, is defeating or would defeating ISIS be the #1 foreign policy priority of a Trump administration? And how would we do it differently than the way we're doing it now?
Thank you very much. And let me remind you that I am also celebrating the 25th anniversary of presenting the first briefing to AJC. It was in Miami after and the 25th anniversary of actually meeting you and your colleague. So it's good. Road. Yeah, and it's all in 1 year. Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank the organization. And of course, my good congressmen, both of them, with whom we have done a great job of working for solving these issues. To answer this one point, it is indeed on the top of the list of a Donald Trump administration if it occurs. And there are differences between how an Obama-Clinton administration would address them, has addressed them, and will address them, and how a Trump administration would. First of all, with the narrative that would unveil how the strategies would be devised. It is not about containing and degrading. It's about dismantling.
That's right.
Dismantling ISIS. But what comes with the dismantling are 2 chapters. Chapter 1, how do we dismantle with which force? This is open for discussion. I can just throw a preamble about it. But as important as the force that would be required and the strategy to dismantle, meaning to take it down both in Iraq and in Syria and in Libya, because if you leave one piece of it, it's like those movies, like the Terminator, they'll come back.
Sure.
And then what would replace it? We have seen that movie before. We terminated Al-Qaeda with surges. And then with wrong policies, in my view, it generated ISIS. If ISIS is terminated, the way ISIS will be terminated will determine if it will grow again or not. And I could go to the details if asked about it. So those are the two questions. Those are the two files that a Trump administration, as early as it comes in 2017, will be addressing. And there is an urgency. I wish it was now, the Trump administration, because we can't do much about it between now and March. So I would add one element. Between now and March, the ground situation of ISIS is also going to be at play. So ISIS is not static. The Iraqis are moving against it. The Kurds are moving against it. They are going into other areas. So the bottom line is, the central idea is to form a regional coalition. That's the central idea, and we can talk about it. The best form of this coalition is a coalition that, if it moves against ISIS in mostly Sunni Arab areas, it's not going to be considered as hostile, as if a ground force that is, let's say, Shia, or that is from other backgrounds. Because remember, the situation now is sectarian, heavily sectarian. The force that would go to Sunni areas need not to generate the next sectarian fight. So that would be number one. We could discuss what design of Arab coalition, because there are many questions, pro and cons, in this situation. Now, the more difficult architecture is going to be, once these areas are freed and ISIS is dismantled, what kind of local powers should there be to stop the rise of the next ISIS? And that links also to who will represent those Arab, mostly Sunni areas. Of course, if we are liberating Kurdish areas or minorities areas, Yazidi and Assyrians, they are there, and we are actually with them and supporting them. But Mosul, Raqqa, other places, there need to be a question asked who should be in charge there. And what complicates this, that we're operating in two sovereign countries. Syria has an issue which is more difficult than Iraq, and Iraq has a government, but we have some issues with that government because that government is very close to Iran. So that would be my intro to why would this be different than what is happening right now.
I'd like to ask Congressman Franks to jump in on this. As the vice chair of the Emerging Threats Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, and just with your background in watching very closely what's happening in the Middle East, Congressman, is there a way that we can be using the coalition that, in fact, the United States has been part of more effectively than the way we have been in the last number of years?
Well, I think so, and I guess the first thing I'd want to do is just to start out and express extreme gratitude for the opportunity to be here with all of you. Gus Bilirakis is a precious friend, and not only to me, but to Israel and to the cause of human freedom. And I think Dr. Walid Phares is one of the truly cogent minds in America, and his credibility is unimpeachable, and his heart is obvious. And Jason, thank you for always being there. We see each other quite a bit in Washington. And I will apologize one time for being late. The hotel where I was, which was a Hilton hotel, did not have taxis. Their guy was off, and I thought, God. Conrad Hilton would roll over in his grave, and I will point out that I did beat Ken Abramovitz here. So I'm sorry, he's a good friend, so I can do that to him. But I think ultimately, when we're dealing with to carry on from Dr. Phares, he's certainly the expert here. But ultimately, with ISIS, I think that there's really two things that we have to deal with. Of course, that's intent and capacity. I don't think we're going to change their intent. I think that this is one of the most insidious organizations that has ever come along the road of the human experience. And so we have to completely dismantle their capacity. And, typically we've said we do that with DIME, the acronym DIME. We have to do it diplomatically, informationally. We have to absolutely take away their ability to communicate with each other on the internet. Militarily, we have to literally destroy them on the battlefield. I know that sounds sort of macho, but I truly believe, I'm a Sunday school teacher, I don't want to hurt anybody, but I don't want them to hurt anybody either, and they are shown a penchant to do that. We have to take away their ability to have any launching capability, any territory. We have to deny them that. And of course, economically, we have to make sure that they can't, if they have territory, that a crow flying across it has to pack a lunch. I mean, they just need to be completely restricted from their oil revenues and other things of that nature. And then, of course, we have to shut off their vectors to come to America. And then ultimately, we have to take this on a strategic level where we're calling it for what it is. The jihadist, the global jihad is what it is. And this administration has not been able to do that. They've taken the measure of that. I know this is a political season, and you all know that I am not exactly a Barack Obama fan, so I'm not trying to reintroduce that to you. But I am convinced that one of the great problems that we have right now is that this administration projects a weakness and a lack of resolve in this area, and it literally has just given them a free rein forward. So I hope that as we go through the discussion here, we can just remind all ourselves, as much as America is important to Israel, Israel is so important to America. I think that Israel does more for America than we do for them. And I have the privilege of chairing the Israel Caucus, and of course, as an evangelical, we can't explain our existence without Israel. And so I'm just grateful for the advocacy that all of you have. My final thought, I suppose, here, just to try to jump out and get it all I can out in the early moments. I think that as dangerous as ISIS is, and all of our focus should be on defeating them, that an even greater danger is the Iranian nuclear potential, because if jihad ever gains nuclear capability, their capacity then is multiplied exponentially, and it just changes everything. So I hope we have a good election this fall, and I hope we can continue to work together, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I'd like to, there are several threads that have been put out on the table by you and by Dr. Phares and by Congressman Bilirakis. Let me just pick up on one that came from Congressman Bilirakis earlier, having to do with America's approach to, not just to Israel, but to the Arab states as well, and you also spoke about Turkey. Should our approach to the Arab states change? Is the democracy deficit in the region one of the reasons why the region seems to be on fire? Or I'm just wondering if there are different ways for the United States to approach the countries of the region.
Well, we need to work with the democracies. Just like I said, the only true democracy. Well, we've got three that I'm working with, but our greatest ally in the Middle East is Israel. And we need to build on that, and to have Cyprus and Greece right there with them, and some other allies in the region, including Egypt and Jordan, we can build on that. I wanted to say, maybe I went to Israel, as I stated in my opening statement, and met with the Prime Minister, and I don't really think we do a good enough job as members of Congress actually getting the information, and we have to be careful that Israel is a tremendous ally, and Israel does so much for the United States, but all of our allies around the region, and we don't get that message. They talk about when we get the $3 billion in foreign aid to Israel, most of it comes back to us anyhow, as you know. But the things that Israel is doing for the democracies around the world is really incredible. So I think we build on these democracies in the region, particularly now that with the instability that we have in Turkey.
Very good. Dr. Phares.
Yeah, I'd like to address one other aspect with regard to what the two honorable congressmen mentioned, the special relations between the United States and Israel. That is not to be questioned. I mean, that is part of a people-to-people relationship in my own witnessing over the past 26 years. So we've learned that. It's basically those forces, radical forces in the region, which has been trying to drive a wedge between Israel and the United States. This is a front that has opened over the past 5 to 6 years. BDS is one form of it, and I know it's very important for not just the Israelis, but the communities here that are friendly with Israel, not just the Jewish communities, but Christian communities as well. There is an opportunity now, a historic strategic opportunity, to maneuver in the Middle East because of the threat of ISIS and because of the menace of the Iranian nuclear regime. I can see, and I've been to Egypt, and I'm in touch with many Arab, let's say, politicians, opinion makers, and others. There is a discrete move now, move of intention, beginning with Egypt, because Egypt has borders and has Sinai, but also stretching all over to Jordan and the Arabian Peninsula, the Gulf, that could serve as a catalyst for the second wave of peace agreements or of understandings. So this is something we should bank on. The next administration should be working on this. This administration, unfortunately, went into the opposite direction. I can see that the formation of an Arab alliance, to answer your initial question, is not just against ISIS. And I'm saying this probably in public for the first time. It would serve against ISIS, and the congressmen have mentioned some of these partners, but it could serve also to create a change in the political culture of radicalism, and therefore start working on a rapprochement between these countries and Israel. And a third combo and a third byproduct is to contain the radical wings of the Palestinian side, so that would be much easier for the next administration, and Mr. Trump has declared it publicly, that he is willing and want to create different parameters for solving this issue. So I would say the Arab coalition is a very important achievement if it could be done in the first few months of the next administration.
So let me ask you, maybe Dr. Phares, but also Congressman Franks as well, to pick up. In your estimation, has the current administration's focus on trying to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian, or at least make some sort of progress on the Israeli-Palestinian front, a mistake? Instead of focusing attention on that conflict, should they have instead should they now be focusing more on creating the possibility of a closer alliance between the Arab states with the objective of having regional peace before you get to peace between Israelis and Palestinians? Well, maybe Congressman Franks, I see you shaking your head. You're nodding your head.
You know, I'm all for doing anything that we can for America to have a clear vector of communication and relationship with the Arab states. You know, Egypt has been probably an amazing example where we found ourselves supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, America, the United States of America, being on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood. And then when the people rose up and saw what a monster they had elected or had come into power, then this administration, astonishingly, dumbfoundingly, was working against their replacing that terrible regime, and even saying that it was a military coup. And I understand the terminology, but Sisi, he's probably not going to be my hero anytime soon, but he is a tremendous step forward. And so I'm all for that. But I think there's a great danger when we try to say, well, we want to be the broker. That's fine. We have that opportunity as the unipolar superpower of the world to do that. But we should never create moral equivalence between Israel and Hezbollah or Israel and Hamas, because that ignores the very dynamic that causes all of this pressure and tension and contention and just downright evil. We have to be able to say, no, you guys are the folks that are bombing families in Israel. That's a wrong thing. That's something that America is against, and to somehow create moral equivalence, I think, is almost more dangerous than what some of the bad guys do. If we're not able to call things for what they are and say that this is acceptable behavior and this isn't, I don't know that we ever change the equation. I don't want to step outside the parameter of your question, but the other thing is that somehow this administration has to make it clear that our ultimate priority is Israel in this discussion. We have to do that, because if we just pretend that there's an equivalence there, it's a dangerous thing. And yet this administration has berated Israel more sometimes for building homes in their own capital cities and their own territories than they have for Iran building nuclear weapons with which to threaten the peace and security of the entire world. It's unbelievable, the balance there. I do a lot with Israel related to missile defense, and I say this because it's still in process, so you can encourage the people.
We were hoping to get into the MOU discussion, so thank you, please.
Okay. Are you sure? Okay. I was the one that offered the amendment in the Armed Services Committee Committee to do the missile defense plus up for Israel of $600 million. And we succeeded in the House. And I get over to the Senate, where the Armed Services Committee chairman, Mr. McCain, is essentially okay with it. And I think he's going to be all right with it. The challenge is we have this enormous pressure from the administration to build that down. Now, I'm on the conference committee, and we're going to absolutely burn the House down to get this, the Senate to accede to the House position. But we shouldn't have to always be fighting the administration when we're talking about a defensive capability, and yet that's where we constantly are. So sooner or later, we have to say who we are, that Israel, I don't want to use an example, but I love all children, but my 2 twins are family. And so I really love them. That's true. And sooner or later, we as Americans say we love countries everywhere. We want to be, to try to be a peace partner with everyone. But Israel's family. And you cross Israel and you cross us. And that has to be clear, and it isn't right now. And until it is, we're not going to be able to get to the real problem.
I agree. Thank you. I want to make it very clear that AJC has long worked with you and admired the strength of your commitment to the U.S.-Israel relationship. And Congressman Franks, thank you very much for what you've just said. And Congressman Bilirakis, you know how closely we worked with you and your team on these very issues. So thank you for everything that you've done, your leadership. Let me come back to Dr. Phares for kind of a broader question. You're not just someone who advises a future president, but also someone who has done a great deal of scholarship, done a great deal of research on the issue of counterterrorism. You don't do scholarship, I'm sorry. You have written a lot, and you've studied a lot about the forces behind extremism. Where does the appeal of ISIS come from? How can we actually get at that, at the source, if we're defeating this menace? We can take back territory in Syria and Iraq, and yet there are still eruptions across the globe. How do you actually get at the source of the problem that we're facing?
Well, there is a consensus now among the experts, scholars, lawmakers, both here and in some parts of Europe at least, that at the origin of the rise of any jihadist movement, Salafi jihadist movement on the Sunni side or the Khomeinist on the other side, the Iranian side, at the origin and the root, you have, number one, an ideology. Yep. If we don't admit that, we're going nowhere.
That's right.
But then the carrier of the ideology, because ideology alone means books on the shelves.
That's right.
They don't talk. So first we have to admit that there is an ideology, designate it, talk about it, explain it to the public. The public hears words, but they need to understand. Second, you have the movement that carries this ideology into the public, into society. We're still not yet at ISIS. All of this happens before in Al-Qaeda, before in ISIS. And then you have those militant or terrorist organizations who basically are backed by the movement, where the movement are the pools, and then of course based on the ideology. What we have been doing over the past maybe 15, 16 years is to fight the third stage.
That's right.
The third stage are the organizations. That's why, especially under this administration, we have killed this leader with our drone, and then they give you quantitative, but we're not killing the qualitative. Right? We keep killing Al-Awlaki. It was a major victory in Yemen, and then Yemen now, third of it is under Al-Qaeda, half of that third is ISIS. We've killed what was the other one, Al-Zarqawi, remember, in Iraq while we were there, and then Al-Baghdadi is 10 Al-Zarqawis. Yeah. So there is a dilemma here as to how you're going to fight the understructures of this. This is the problem that we have faced with this administration. And I might be a little bit more honest and frank by saying not just this administration, the last 2 years of the previous administrations, and not the policy level of the Bush administrations, but the bureaucracy level of the Bush administration. It's the same, because the bureaucracy then and the academia behind that bureaucracy are still advising now the current administration. So we have to have a right definition. And the problem is dual. Number one, there is a resistance in Washington and in the elite, the academic elite, if I may say, most of it at least, to recognize that there is an ideology. And by doing so, If they don't recognize it as an ideology, they are confusing the public.
Yes.
So the public goes in all directions and sometimes goes to extreme directions. If the government does not provide you with that information, then you are on your own. If the elite abandons you and say, well, the roots of terrorism is a divorce in the family or did not find a job, that's not true, because that is these are universal problems. So first thing is to do that designation, and I think the next administration will do it. I'm very happy that in the Arab world, they are ahead of us now. Some of these governments, well, I'm not going to be talking about Israel because Israel has done it years ago, but some of these governments, and I go back to Egypt, number one, Tunisia, others in North Africa.
The UAE, very definitely.
Voila.
Yeah.
The UAE is, the world of think tanks in the UAE is extremely important to look at. That's why I mentioned there is something below that Arab coalition. It's not just about policy and strategy. They are ready to start fighting back against the ideology. It is ironic, I would say it is shocking, that while they are now rising against the ideology, our administration is fleeing. Even the French call them Islamists. The British call them Islamists. The Russian. There is a consensus. 4 members of the Security Council call them for what they are, except one. That's us. So that's what needs to change in my opinion.
I don't want to jump in here one more time, Gus, forgive me, but
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I don't know how to emphasize the wisdom in my mind of what you've just heard. I don't know how anybody could articulate it better. This notion that, we've tactically been very successful. We can go and blow them up and think, but until we get to the strategic level of being able to vitiate and condemn, and really condemn in the minds of the world collective mentality, this notion of the ideology that somehow that they're transcendentally justified to murder their fellow human beings in pursuit of their ideology. If we're not able to completely revoke that in the minds of both the observers and within ultimately Islam itself, we have to make sure that this is something that the whole world rejects so badly that they begin to say, okay, is this really who we are? Is this really? And begin to get some of the moderate elements to start to reject it and begin to squeeze it out of the ideological spectrum. Because until we do that, if someone believes that this is their way of serving Allah, and I don't mean to, I hope I'm not being crass here, but if they believe that, it's very difficult. We in the evangelical world, we have a saying, it's better to stand in the way of an entire army than one Calvinist who believes he's doing the will of God. And we have to make sure that we reject this ideology, and until we do it on that basis, I'm afraid that we're destined to continue to try to deal with them on the battlefield on a tactical and not a strategic level.
Thank you, Congressman.
Well, this administration is really in denial. And you said it, Dr. Phares, with the other Arab countries being way ahead of us because they see it as survival. This is the biggest threat that we have. ISIS in Iran. And that's why I think that this administration, I don't want to get too political, but I think that the Trump administration, I know it's a Republican convention, but I know it's a bipartisan, but and Rudy said it the other day, Newt said it last night. Donald Trump, I think, realizes, now, there's a show there, but I mean, when you talk to him and you see the advisors, and he's very serious about this. This is a number one priority for him. This is if we're not safe, nothing else matters. And I think he's smart enough to understand that he doesn't get everything. He sees the forest between the trees, but he's going to surround himself with very capable people like Dr. Phares to make these decisions, not the elitists in Washington, D.C. This guy is an expert. I mean, you've lived through it to a certain extent. And that goes with all the agencies. And I really think that there's a real, again, he sees the force similar to President Reagan. And he's been successful in business, not because, he drives a tractor, because he hires the most capable people to do the job. And he oversees that, and he holds them accountable. So I think we have a real opportunity here, and I think he's extremely whatever. Despite some of the comments that were made a few months ago, he's very pro-Israel. Believe me, and we need Israel. Otherwise, we're doomed if we don't have Israel. Thank you.
It occurs to me that his appointment of Mike Pence should be a tremendous statement to Israel. I served 10 years in Congress with Mike Pence, and there is not a more committed, pro-Israel human being that I know of anywhere. I mean, he's deeply committed, and it's going to be important that people like that are around Mr. Trump, because I'm not sure I'm just being extremely candid with all of you. I'm not sure he's really got this all figured out, and I think that the instinct is there. But we're going to have people that really, truly are deeply committed, but also understand the equation around him. As long as he's appointing people like Mike Pence, there's hope.
I'd like to open this up to questions, but I'd like to open it up for questions from the floor. But before I do that, I have one last question I'd like to pitch at our panelists here, and that has to do with Iran. This was referenced a few moments ago. There was some news earlier this week. The Associated Press produced a document that had been a side agreement, it's called, in the course of the JCPOA negotiations that lay out how Iran intends, after year 10, to put online more highly efficient centrifuges that will allow them to very quickly highly enrich uranium. Was that a surprise? Members of Congress supposedly had been briefed on all this. Did you know going into this debate? I know where you came out of the debate last year, but did you know going in that after 10 years Iran would be in a position to have a stockpile if they chose to do so?
I feel like I'm dominating the conversation here.
No. You're the expert in this area.
11 years ago, I called for Iran to be referred to Security Council when they had 167 IR-1 centrifuges, 167. And the people thought, well, you're being a little too protective. You care about children in Israel. That's about all you care about. And that's not true. But nevertheless, I was getting a lot of blowback. And I said, this is very bad. There's no reason for them to enrich uranium. And they said, yes, but they need 3,000 centrifuges to ever become a danger or ever become capable of producing the kind of fissile material that would sustain a nuclear weapons program. I said, that's where they're headed. And everybody thought, not everybody, but some of our detractors said, well, that's a little overreaction. I was wrong, as you know. They didn't do the 3,000 centrifuges. They went to 19,000. And then this administration swoops in and says they're going to fix it. And they said, well, you can only have 5,000. But here's the thing. You can, and this goes to your question, you can go from IR-1s to wherever you want, IR-8s if you want to. Well, IR-8s are 20 times as efficient as IR-1s. So their agreement now, if you want to put it numerically, their agreement right now with 5,000 plus IR-8s gives them the equivalent of 100,000 IR-1s, which would sustain 5 or 6 major nuclear programs. So I don't want to sound just overwrought here, but I just can't believe that we find ourselves in the position that we are. And in 10 years, Iran will be able to have a completely self-sustaining nuclear weapons program. They don't need any other technology. They don't need any other material. They have everything they need. All they need is time. And this administration has bought them the ability to put all these things together to stage it to where, when that 10 years is up, then they're prepared almost immediately, not only to have nuclear weapons, but to be able to sustain them indefinitely.
Now, the agreement does commit them to a very, very low stockpile, however, but they have
That's
the
true,
capability.
but when you have 100,000, the equivalent of 100,000 IR-1s, it doesn't take long to build a stockpile.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Congressman or Walid, would you like to jump in on that, on Iran's capabilities and intentions?
I would build on what the actual expert in Congress has advanced and to talk about not the actual nuclear agreement, but what is literally above, the strategic vision, which is not just about the weapon, but about the strategic intentions. And this is what we have missed in the debate in Washington, D.C. The Iranian regime, in my view, and now in the view of the candidate, he's making more and more statements in that direction. By the way, Mr. Trump, in the beginning, a few months ago, mentioned that, well, quote, this is a bad agreement. This is a very bad agreement. So what you understand from that is that a bad agreement should not last, should not be there, so it should be renegotiated. And then he started to talk about not just the agreement, but the behavior of the regime in the region. So this is what I would like to say a couple of things about. The Iranian regime strategy has the nuclear agreement as one component. The real larger component is what I call, and those who have lived moments in Israel can understand that, an Iran dome. Israel has a little dome to protect from rockets and Gaza and Hezbollah. The dome means that they are in control of how fast they're going to go or how slow they're going to go with the build-up of the nuclear capacities. What that means too, that they have negotiated over the nukes, over the nuclear power. What did they obtain in return of having accepted to delay? Because what they've done actually is not to shut down, it's to delay.
That's exactly right.
They have obtained at least $150 billion. That's release of money. And they are obtaining that their markets are open for investment from Western sources. This is gigantic.
Yes.
They have obtained what they have never obtained since 1979. What is it they're going to do with the $150 billion? To spend it on their population, to solve their economic problems? Of course not. No. They're going to immediately spend it on improving their ballistic missiles. To send what? Flowers with ballistic missiles? They're designed basically to send those weapons. Better than that, they are buying now from the Russians and from other places anti-aircraft, very advanced missiles.
Yep.
Why? Because they assume that at one point something's going to happen, they need to have their dome. Had they produced their first nuke, they could have if bought it or tactical.
Yeah.
They knew what was coming immediately. D-Day +1, it will be a strike coming to them from multiplicity of players and actors, not just Israel. Maybe Arabs, maybe us, a different administration. So I think they're very smart. They're now building that capacity so that the last chapter of their strategy is finally to tell us, like India and Pakistan did in 1999, oops, we have it now, and you can't do much about it. The price is going to be very high.
That's right.
Because if they have missiles, if they have anti-aircraft missiles, if we allow them to maintain, that's another aspect, their strategic presence in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, they thought parts of Yemen, then they can deploy in those places as well, and they have already deployed Quds Force. So you follow what I'm trying to say,
yes.
Is that the Iran deal allowed them to build that dome, which the next administration, not just here, but in Europe and in the region, and the Arabs are very nervous about it, will have to deal with something much more dangerous than ever before by the Iranian regime.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Phares. Let me open the floor to questions, and I see Alan Rich. Please.
I just want to build on what Dr. Phares and Congressman Franks were talking about. It's now January of 2017, and President Trump is inaugurated. Well, how do we address this situation? What is the strategy? The agreement is in place. Europeans, say that the agreement is essential. They support it. Clearly, they're not going to agree with a new administration to abrogate the agreement. So in part, it's going to be unilateral action on the part of the United States. What do we do?
If we can answer this question, we'll have $1 billion. This is the most difficult. But let me look at what can be projected, because some of the things could be projected. We don't know really what the region would look like between now and then. First of all, in any administration, we all know, would need 3 to 4 months to get there, up and running. So we're going to add those 4 months. We're already in maybe April, May, June. The Europeans, you just mentioned it, and I'm sure the lawmakers agree, are very hungry. They want to apply. They want to go in. They want to trade. But then Europe has some problems as well. This is not the unified Europe. There are multiple Europes, so on and so forth. So expect the Europeans to go straight. The Arabs will be in reverse direction. The Arabs, I'm going to say it now, it's an open statement, will be very happy if we have a change of policy here. They always ask me in international media about the shutdown, and we explain to them that this has to do with homeland security, which I'm happy to explain. The real question they have, what are you going to do about Iran? The first question is Iran, what are you going to do about it, and the Muslim Brotherhood, many among them. And the second, by the way, why is he making those statements? I'm being candid, and it's in public. So strategically, they will be coming in this direction and meeting us. And of course, that's the moment I was talking about, that Israel will have a very important role. There will be a triangle emerging. So the next administration will have to consider that new opportunity. You have raised an important point in terms of technicalities, legal technicalities. No, we've heard in the campaign, and I don't opine on the campaign statements much. Some would say we're going to clear that agreement as soon as we can. We're in the Oval Office. Mr. Trump has adopted a different approach, which is, I'm going to ask the Iranians to apply what we need them to apply. Okay? If they don't, then we'll escalate, then we'll renegotiate. If they don't, we may send it to the legislative branch again. So there are multiple ways to deal with the actual deal. But what is important is what we're going to do with our allies on the ground, with the Israelis, what we're going to coordinate, if the Iranians are going to expand, and with the new Arab coalition, if by then it will be available for us.
Well, I think that probably the thing that is most encouraging to me today is the fact that this man will be advising President Donald Trump, and because I think he's articulated it very well. I am convinced that with this agreement in place and enforced as it is or isn't being enforced, that we can't, that's an untenable circumstance. We can't continue under that matrix. So it's my opinion that the new administration, they'll have an opportunity. You know, there's that moment in the life of every problem when it's big enough to be seen and still small enough to be addressed. They're going to have a moment when people are going to say, okay, let's see where they are. And Iran is going to take not only the measure of our capability, but the intent of our new leadership. And I believe that Donald Trump is going to have to say, okay, the first time you abrogate anything, and they've already done that. You know, they've already tested ballistic missiles, and they've absolutely done that.
They've already violated it.
And the minute they violate it, I think he has to say, okay, we're going to take a pause here right now. With this, that's your opportunity to say, whoa, stop. We're going to have to renegotiate right here now because you're not keeping the deal. So that he puts the onus upon them, because if he lets them get away with it, then it's hard. It's hard to gain that ground back. He has to take that one opportunity that he has to say it's a different administration. You're no longer going to be able to ignore your agreement without consequences. And we are not only going to enforce it, but when we see that you've broken it, we're going to renegotiate it. And that's the opportunity that I think we have to take. And we're going to have to be very strong about it, because what you said a little while ago is so true. Once we're with this agreement, it's much harder for the administration, the next administration, to deal with it, because it's a much more static equation. But then I'll just say this. Whatever it costs us to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapons capability, whatever it is, even war, it will pale in insignificance compared to what it will cost us to deal with a nuclear-armed Iran.
Thank you, Congressman.
I agree with Trent on that. We need to make a statement within the next couple months once Trump is in office. And one thing I will tell you, just so you'll know, we were in a conference with him, and Trent was there, and you made some statements, I believe. But he is willing to work with the Congress. He's going to need the Congress, and particularly with this agreement. So it's very important. Again, it's a Republican National Convention, but we need to have Israel-friendly members that will stand up, okay? And it's usually on our side of the aisle. But we do have some Democrats on the other side that stood up against the administration on this deal, and I commend them for it. So it's very important that we work together in the Senate and the House and the administration to stand up to Iran.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like to actually pick up on something that was discussed at the very beginning of this conversation with you, Congressman Bilirakis, and that has to do with the emerging and quite important alliance that has developed between Israel and Greece, Israel and Cyprus, that really trilateral alliance. You've been a leader in pointing out the benefits for Israel and for Greece and Cyprus in this. In light of the recently announced rapprochement between Israel and Turkey, is there a concern in Greece and Cyprus about this that affecting this relationship, or are they convinced it will not?
We think that Greece, the relationship, as a matter of fact, President Anastasiadis mentioned this, and I mentioned it to Prime Minister Netanyahu, that we feel, and Greece, Cyprus, and the U.S. feel that it would better strengthen the relationship between Israel and Greece and Cyprus. So the ties to Turkey, it's in Israel's best interest, but it's in the best interest of the region that they work together. As a matter of fact, I believe that Israel could be a broker when we're talking about the reunification of Cyprus. And have a great amount of influence. And it's a good partnership because we have the energy security as well. And it's in Turkey's best interest to work with Cyprus Israel and Greece. With regard to the pipeline, energy and security is the key, but also the military cooperation, the exercises. So I think it's a win-win that the relationship between Israel and, well, we don't know what's going to happen now with this coup. That's the thing. There's so much uncertainty there. But again, the bond between the three countries, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus, has really been, it's a wonderful thing. And again, AJC, Hawk, myself, Ted Deutsch played a large role in that. And everywhere I go, they all commend us for it. So
By the way,
it's in our best interest.
Your partner, Ted Deutsch, the co-chair of that caucus,
Right.
of the alliance, rather, will be with us in Philadelphia next week.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Similar discussion.
Wonderful. And he's one of the ones that stood up against the administration on the Iran agreement as well. So we respect him greatly.
Can I add on that
Please,
one?
go ahead.
Of course, Gus is basically the leader with regard to the Hellenic sphere and Eastern Mediterranean issues. But ironically, until the attempt to the coup, there were even reports that Israel could very ironically play a role in a rapprochement, which is unheard of, between Turkey and Egypt.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to you? Because Turkey and Egypt are having huge tensions. That Israel, which usually is, the one you have all tensions with, when the Turkish side came, and Turkey reached out to Israel because it found itself in a very difficult situation with what was happening with Russia and et cetera, et cetera. Now, this was before the attempt. In my assessment, the attempt has changed many things.
Yeah.
I would say everything. I'll just use 1 minute to. The Erdogan government, which is part of NATO, and we treat them as partners, so on and so forth. We use the bases there, etc. Has 4 confrontations going on in Turkey, and it's not well clear in our media here. One with the youth of Turkey. 3 years ago, the Gezi uprisings. These are the more secular youth, liberal. They failed, but basically the tensions are there. Second, with the secular opposition. They were able to get a small majority a couple summers ago, and then they got out of the majority. Third, an ongoing campaign with the Kurds, most of the PKK. And fourth, what is tipping that scale is that attempt. The attempt, true, was done by small units, and there's a network inside. But it is the reaction to the attempt that worries me. The reaction, and for the sake of Turkey, to have about 15 to 20,000 people detained in 3 days as a reaction to what they said was just a tiny group of people inside the armed forces, that judges, thousands of judges, of teachers, that is very dangerous. That would assert the authority of Mr. Erdogan, yes, but in the world of social media, of Facebook, we learned. We saw Egypt, we saw Tunisia, we learned that this may not last long if there is no attention and moderation in the measures. I wanted to just make sure.
I mean, it's dangerous, the way he's reacted to this. There's no question. And again, the tensions and the bad feelings, because of the anti-Semitism coming out of Turkey, particularly with Mr. Erdogan's statements over the years, has been awful. I said this, and we had the discussion in Israel, and we met with the deputy foreign minister, and it's a business arrangement. It's not like it's a love affair, but it's best that, and I don't know what's going to happen with the coup attempt. This guy is, I think he wants to be the Sultan. I really do. I think that's what his ambitions are. He wants to be a dictator. But then again, he has been to a certain extent, even though supposedly it's a democracy in Turkey. But we have to cooperate in that region, and they are NATO allies. So we must work with them. There's no question.
Thank you, Congressman.
When it comes to the whole Hellenic sphere that Dr. Phares mentioned, I just do exactly what Gus Bilirakis tells me to do.
Well,
sign all bills. I just do what he says.
For the United States first, as you know.
Yes, sir.
So I'm responsible. I wouldn't tell you to do anything.
No, I know he wouldn't, and I know nothing.
And we have the same goals. There's no question in the region. So.
Yes, I see a question in the back of the room.
My name is Walid. I'm the chief of the Moroccan news agency based in Washington, D.C. I would like to thank the panel, the honorable members of the panel. You have talked, Dr. Walid and Congressman Franks, about the threat of ISIS. But unfortunately, the threat of terrorism does not stop.
That's true.
What is the next Trump administration going to do with the threat posed by Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, for example? This is my first question. My second question, you and Congressman Franks, you have stressed the fact that it's not enough to be tactically successful against the terrorist group. We have to produce ideas to construct their ideology. Morocco has been training imams from Maghreb countries, from African countries, and to teach them and educate them to the necessity to openness and moderation. Plus, on the internal level, we have a constitution in Morocco that recognizes the Hebrew heritage, African heritage, Arab heritage, and the Andalusian heritage as part and parcel of our national identity. I would like to have your take, Dr. Walid, and maybe Congressman Franks on these two questions.
Thank you very much for the question. I subscribe to the arguments you've advanced. And with regard to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb, we would be very concerned. We are already concerned, those who are working on this file, because while we are concentrating on the Levant, parts of Libya are going ISIS. Parts of Libya may open to the Sahel, all these countries between Chad and Senegal and up to Morocco. And there is this issue of coordination in North Africa that is not happening yet, including with the Algerians. And so there are issues that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, we would find ourselves shutting down ISIS in Mosul and Raqqa, and a whole planet of ISIS opening in the Sahel, which is to your south, to the south of Morocco. So the next administration will have to be able to play multiple dimensions at the same time, thinking that we're going to bring down ISIS in the Levant and then work with the governments. What we have now are at least 3 governments that we are working with. We'll see with the rest. Egypt is up and running, Tunisia, and then Morocco, which, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that, has a unique experience in the war of ideas. I met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar last year in Egypt, and he himself told me there are some Arab countries, moderate Arab countries, are pushing back where we should, and that should be in counter-radicalization, but also in the high schools. I mean, Morocco has been doing a great job in trying to de-radicalize in the high schools. So this will get the attention not just of the next administration, but I know the next Congress, which has done tremendous job in the hearings. I mean, I've heard of and been part of some and briefings about this counter-radicalization. We need to really partner with those moderates in the Arab world, and Morocco is a leading country. Thank you.
Once again, I find myself agreeing with every syllable that this man just spoke, and not having articulation to be able to say it in any different way or add. So I'll just add to we have to not only do the tactical success, there has to be tactical success so that the worst don't have the energies and the resources to spread that ideology. But ultimately, if we're going to do this, this is a world now that's tied together by the internet. We have to launch a worldwide commitment to condemning this ideology. It's a false ideology. We have to do it both inside and outside the Islamic world. And within Islam, you know, we got about 1.4 billion Muslims in the world now. If this ideology gains serious traction within that entire community, it threatens the peace and security of the entire human family. This is a very serious deal. We have to be able to do what you're doing, and I believe that partnering with moderate Muslims is vital. And I'm grateful for what Morocco is doing, because when you see children the age of my 7-year-olds in madrasas being taught not only to hate the West but to embrace this ideology, it is a frightening thing. And to hide from it and say, well, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I mean, I'm someone who, I chair the Religious Freedom Caucus. I believe in religious freedom. I believe everyone has the right to believe the way that they choose. But when they start advocating the slaughter and terror toward their innocent fellow human beings, it's time for those of us who have an ideological commitment to step forward and confront that ideologically. This administration won't even name it. I mean, I'm wondering if they would call burglars unwanted house guests.
That's a new one.
Or uninvited. So we have to be able to address it on that level. So I'll stop.
Before I take the next question, I don't want this panel to finish without addressing one issue that has been raised in the media, especially in the last few weeks, and that has to do with the Republican platform and how it approaches Israel and its neighbors. Traditionally, Republican platforms and Republican administrations, alongside Democratic administrations, have supported the notion of a two-state solution. Now, it's a difficult process to try to get a two-state solution when you've got one party that's not interested in negotiating. We don't have a partner. And so our ally Israel has had a very difficult time finding a way to get to negotiations with the Palestinians. But what is the feeling of Donald Trump, and what is the feeling of the Republican Party about a two-state solution, having dropped that phrase from the Republican platform this year? And I'd like to ask, really, frankly, anyone, but I think Dr. Phares is probably in the best position to start that conversation.
I would think otherwise. I think the lawmakers who have been longer in the Republican Party would begin talking about the Republican Party, and I could narrow it to the group that works on
Well, I
this
just
issue.
want to say
Please jump
that,
in.
you know, I think that Israel should make that decision. I don't think that we should be making decisions for Israel. I haven't seen the platform. But you know, working with Bibi and his administration and other leaders there, they should be making those determinations, not us. Not us.
Okay.
I say that's up to Israel. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'll speak a little louder. I apologize. Usually I don't have trouble speaking real loud. I'm Greek, but...
But is the goal a two-state solution, ultimately?
I just have to ask for diplomatic immunity here because I agree with Gus that we have to respect Israel's internal politics, and they understand what they're doing more than we do, and I have always done that. I've been a strong supporter of Bibi Netanyahu, on a political basis. But I still respect their internal politics because I don't think most of us in the West even fully understand how their system works. But I have to tell you, again, this is the diplomatic community part. I supported what we did in the change in our platform. I've traditionally, even under the Bush administration, said, all right, this two-state solution makes me a little fearful because it sounds like it's giving up land. Israel's giving up more land, and all it does, it seems like, traditionally, is move terrorism closer. And so I have never really been for the two-state solution unless that second state is clearly outside the existing boundaries of Israel now, somewhere where you've got a credible place to do that. But I don't think Israel should give up another square inch of land because I don't think it helps them. Now, again, I'm teachable. Somebody can tell me where that's wrong, and I'm open if it truly brings peace to the streets of Jerusalem. I'm open to that. But right now, I think the platform, they did the right thing, and I think that it's been overtaken by events.
Walid,
Well,
take a shot.
Yeah, a little shot here. The platform is very strongly with Israel. It's clear. The language is, we don't need to re-explain it. Now, I subscribe with the lawmakers that it's really first an Israeli decision, national decision, to decide what is the route. If they decide that the route should be two-state solution, then we will help, the next administration would help in making this possible. So that is the official position, and we're too early in the issue. My personal view is that there are openings now. It's like those alignments of planets that happen once in a while. And that really the condition is that this other entity, whatever we're going to call it, state or what have you, it's who is in charge and what is the political culture. And that should not be a phase into the next phase, which is weakening further. There need to be a massive a revolution in the other side. And I communicated to the Palestinians. We meet with them. We meet with everybody, like maybe you do. And this is not about just inch of land and more or less. It's important for the people who are involved. But we want to know if this other entities, leadership and civil society and schools are finally coming to accept even beyond Jordan and Egypt, because they're living very close to the Israelis. That is what we're looking at. That is why we would need to sit down with many other Arabs. That's why maybe social media could. There are a lot of things that could happen, but the alignment is here. The major threat in the region are the Brotherhood-linked ISIS and Iran. If based on this we could create conditions to have another side that would be willing to say, we would work with you, we'll try to solve it as much as we can, but we're going to push, because if Iran obtains the nukes, everybody is a threat. So let's see how the next 6 months are going to develop.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Kenneth Brownwoods, thank you for your discussion. You discussed the interrelationship of the three worldwide political Islam terror organizations. You left out number 4, which is Sunni Wahhabis. But putting it all together, doesn't the next administration, if it goes after ISIS, has no choice but to go after Iran nuclear sites at the same time? Because if you go after ISIS and destroy ISIS, you just make Iran stronger. So doesn't the administration really have to simultaneously go after ISIS and Iran nukes, and then after that, then go after the two intellectual terror organizations, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Sunni Wahhabis, and basically go after all 4 fronts?
Yes, that's my only comment.
We have time for just a couple of more questions. I think, yes, Stuart.
You just talk about Congressman Frank's $600 million missile. I'm hearing that the MOU will take this out of the future. It will be part of this. Is that true?
Well, obviously, it depends on what the final the elements of the MOU are. Obviously, people like me are doing everything that we can to make sure that it is exactly as you say, so that we don't have to fight this every time. I have in my office, I chair the Israel Allies Caucus, as you know, and we have a full-time person. We had 4 staffers that were Jewish in my office at one point, but the one person's job is to do one thing, and that is to look after policy toward Israel. And of course, so this has been a huge consideration. But every year in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had to fight to get back the plus up for Israel and missile defense, and it's gotten harder and harder and harder. And this time, I don't know. I said that last year. I don't know if we are going to be able to do it or not. We did it last time, and I hope we will this time. But that MOU would take, if it was written right, would take that off the table, and I think it's vitally important to do that.
Thank you, Congressman. I think final question, and yes, please, sir.
I'm going to ask really a corollary of the question that was asked earlier. I know you're Republican, so you've got your particular point of view, but you were asked about what the landscape would look like in Donald Trump's role, and I'm going to ask you what you think the landscape in the Middle East and the relationship with Israel would look like with another President Clinton.
Part of it would be my broken body at the bottom of the Capitol after leaping off. That would be part of the landscape.
Oh, Congressman, please don't do that.
We need because it's the end of the world if that happens, and that's all that.
Not good. I have no confidence in Hillary Clinton. Yeah.
Particularly the Israel relationship and more broadly the Middle East situation.
It's
Yeah.
pretty much
Well,
a worldwide disaster.
Look at her performance as Secretary of State. That's all I can say.
Walid.
Well, I'm not going to leave. I won't let him leave because we need you always in a democracy. The Iran deal will be on.
Yeah.
That's projectable. There's nothing. Therefore, Iran will get more weapons and make more statements to the next administration. Just give us some time. We need to reform. Another few years of this, which would be extremely dangerous. Number 2, ISIS may be pushed against in Iraq and parts of Syria, but then there will be the mother of all sectarian conflicts, because what the next administration is going to do is to subcontract pro-Iranian militias to take out ISIS. If you subcontract pro-Iranian militias to move into Sunni areas, you are creating the next ISIS.
That's right.
They are bound to go into disasters because the strategy. I wish they would change. Even if they win, I would wish as an American and as a citizen of the world that even the competitors would change, because it will be a disaster. Iran will have the nukes, it will create a zone of influence, and there will be a huge sectarian uprising, which will be backed by Qatar and by Mr. Erdogan, who by then would have been much stronger. So these are my projections.
I want to thank the members of Congress and Dr. Phares, but Congressman Franks, Congressman Bilirakis, we've worked with both of you and your offices extensively on a range of issues, and once again, your friendship, your consistent support for Israel, and for the relationship that we've developed together, we are so appreciative of. Thank you. And Dr. Phares, your wisdom is something we count on, and going forward, we look forward to staying in very close touch. I want to tell everyone who is here in the room and anyone who may be watching this in some other medium, AJC will have a similar program next week in Philadelphia. If you were expecting a debate here, different sides of the issue of support for Israel and concerns about counterterrorism, this was not a place for a debate. This was a place to really lay out for the benefit of our community the concerns that have been expressed by the leaders of the Republican Party and the advice that is being given, frankly, to a future Trump administration. This has been a very, I think, an excellent way for us to have an insight into those policies regarding the Middle East, and it's been a great pleasure for me to be part of this panel with you, Dr. Phares, and of course, Congressman Franks and Congressman Bilirakis. We look forward to continuing to work together with you in the next administration, whatever it is, and in the next Congress as well. Thank you very much.